Now we are having a very interesting guest, a dear friend and business partner of ours, Jan Kühne, who is senior consultant, vice president, board member of so many European companies, and especially, he has vast experience in automotive industry from the innovation part. So he played a role in supporting the development teams from BMW i3 and i8 models, electrical cars, also guiding the steering board of Rolls-Royce, Dawn, and deep learning AI implementation teams, and all sorts of other things. So what do you say? Johannes, you already had a coffee, others have a coffee. Jan, what do you say? Shall we go into innovation and cities and, your inspirational notes before they start creating?
So thank you very much, Urška, for that, and thank you very much to Elis and Elis National. I'm very pleased to be here today. Some people say in Slovenia I'm a nomad for innovation, and that's truly the question I'm following up. Right, so today I would like to start coming from the perspective from the world, and maybe bits and pieces of the world. And I might start with a little story. I've been with a bunch of managers in Singapore, and many people know that Singapore is sort of the innovation lab for city transport and developments. And I was there with a bunch of managers from an automotive company. And we were sitting in this conference room, and a guy from the land department, and here it comes, we're talking about an ecosystem of transportation, the land department. He said, you know what? In our city, in the center of city of Singapore, we won't allow any private owned cars anymore. There was a big whoa, what's happening? And then the guys from this big automotive company relaxed and said, oh yeah, in the city center. And then he asked, do you know what the city center is of Singapore? Singapore. And I think this is the question we have to follow up. This is what we have to take in mind. We won't have any private owned cars anymore in the city center of Singapore in the perspective of 2030. And I think this is a real challenge we have to look at. And I would like to take you along on this journey now with three questions. One is, where is the world going to? Whether we go there or not. What role do we want to play there? And how do we get there? And for that, I've got a little presentation for you and hope it works. Should be here now.
It works.
Perfect. Okay, so some trends we have to look out for. That's interesting. See how it moves. Okay, here we are. A good friend of ours, Kurt Carlson, said, in exponential times, if you improve your performance incrementally, you fall behind exponentially. And that was very nice. We saw in the presentations, if we just take the solutions on we have now, we fall back exponentially. But first, I would like to shift our perspective to, do we really live in exponential times? And if we look at that, yes, we do. Just some signals on the track. Indonesia is moving their capital out of Jakarta. Just take that for a moment. They move their whole capital out of Jakarta to an island 800 kilometers away, right in the mountains. So why? Well, because the sea levels are rising. And Jakarta is next to the shore. And roughly 60% of all big cities in the world are along the shorelines. So we really have here something happening. If you see the IPCC report, the fastest rates in sea level growing in the last 3,000 years. The Arctic Sea area, lowest level for the last 1,000 years. We've got guys like Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, says firms ignoring climate crisis will go bankrupt. So the Bank of England is not known as a greenwashing company. And last but not least, Swiss Re, and you might know that's a reinsurance company, they say, if we follow the track we have now, we will lose 18% of GDP, 18% of GDP. And when we think about the financial crisis we had at the beginning of last century, we lost 4%. So just take that in for a moment. And yes, we're living in exponential times. If you look at that curve here, well, that's the CO2 emissions from 1950 on and to the current level. All the rest is going for millennials back. So we never had a CO2 emissions as we have now, and it's still growing exponentially. And it's growing. And exponential curves have the tendency to get very fast, very high. And we see the signals. This is San Francisco in September last year, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It looks like doomsday. This is actually where our headquarters is in Palo Alto. But not only San Francisco, we had Lytton, Canada. End of June, they had 50 plus degrees. 2 days later, it was destroyed by bush wildfires. When we look at that one here, we've got the Arctic cycle. And in June last year, we had 38 degrees. This year, we had 39 degrees on the Arctic Circle. That's where it's supposed to be very cold. And besides that, 1 degree more adds 7% more moisture into the atmosphere. 1 degree more, 7% more moisture into the atmosphere. And on one single day, and this is the real tough stuff, on one single day in Andhra Pradesh, whole Andhra Pradesh was flooded in one single day on the 22nd of November this year. So if we look globally, yes, it's happening. We look to Germany, you probably saw the pictures in July. 200 people died in floods. If you look to New York City on the 1st of September, got flooded. And what is really bothering me and making me worry, we've got rain in Greenland. And on one day in July, it rained in Greenland, and the ice melted there was the amount that you could cover the whole of Florida with 5 centimeters of water on one single day. So it's here. And why is it here? Because it stands here. What you see here is the jet stream. So the jet stream changes its motion, and through that, the weather conditions will stay for a longer time. So if we have a heat wave, we will have it for a long time. If we have real heavy rain, we will have it on a very long time. So the climate is changing already. The risk map of the World Economic Forum says for 2020, 2021, if we fail in climate action, everything else will fail. So climate is not everything, but without livable climate, everything else is nothing. And tech. Keeping again in mind, Kurt Carlson, in exponential times, if you improve your performance incrementally, you fall behind exponentially. Some signals around that track. You see down below SpaceX, and for this SpaceX, of course, it's interesting to have a rocket flying up and landing again. But the number we have to think of is 3.9 billion. Anyone knows what that number means? 3.9 billion? Please open your mic if you know.
It's the amount of spending, maybe?
Good idea. No, it's
hungry people.
Pardon?
Hungry people. What?
Close to it. It's close to it. It's half of the world's population. Half of the world's population don't have access to internet yet. And this is where this SpaceX comes into play, because with Starlink, they're providing access to internet. So there's something happening out there. Another one is, you see this beautiful robot in the middle. It's Ginger. Ginger is running a hospital in Wuhan. You see another example of, we've been talking about autonomous vehicles. You see here, this is a Land Rover, year 92, retrofit by a good friend of mine, Sanjeev. He turned this car into an autonomous vehicle for the roads of India, driving in India. And if you know what Indian roads conditions are, you've got an idea what that has to manage. Another signal on that track is, you see Microsoft, the board of Microsoft there, and I would focus on the middle one. Up to 2050, Microsoft wants to reduce and remove all the carbon emission they've been putting out into the air from the start of the operation. And last but not least, this guy up there, Mark Zuckerberg, and I know he's a very controversial person, but the metaverse, that's something coming up here. So if we talk about mobility, we should look into that one as well. So what do we live? We live in a world, in a very analog world, material world, and we're talking about compounds, buildings, streets, and what have you. We're talking about, we're living in a digital world, social media, globe, structured data. And then we're living in a very hyper digital world where we have all these things like Internet of Thinking, connected, smart sensors, machine learning, AI, you name it. And we're living at a time where we need regenerative economy. You're not lost. You're here. And that's where we start. What we need is, we need climate smart solutions. We need economy smart solutions, as we mentioned in business cases. And that's very important, we need social smart solutions, because economy smart solutions might be fine and techy and great, but if they are not doing the job for the people, they won't work. So we need climate smart solutions, economy smart solutions, smart social smart solutions. And if we look at the money side, global warming will cost us $50 trillion. 50 trillion. And you can take it now on two sides. Either it's a 50 trillion business case or it's a 50 trillion loss case. We should move on to the 50 trillion business case, scalable. And the money moves there. If you look at, for example, the European Union, the whole COVID recovery fund will be monitored and based on economic, social, and global climate smart solutions. The venture capital moves over there. And which is really interesting, the pension funds, you see on the right-hand side, $47 trillion will be moved into regenerative business. And in the core of that, we've got the urbanization. Urbanization is our mega trend in the world. 68% of the people will live by 2050 in cities. 68%. And what does that mean? For example, for Delhi. Delhi will increase their population by the country of Belgium. Imagine Belgium, 11 million people. Well, add 11 million people more into Delhi. That's amazing. And that's happening all over the world. So out of that comes a story. For the next 40 years, we will build every month an entire New York City. Every month, one New York City for the next 40 years. Just imagine of that, what's happening there. Talking about scalable solutions. Yes, if we come around with scalable solutions, here's the marketplace for it. And what's the answer? Well, for example, there's this movement towards walkable cities like Paris, or putting all the traffic underground like Singapore is doing, or looking at places like Toyota. So Toyota is building their own city to explore what development of cities mean and transport. Or you check over to NEOM, if you want to do some research on that. NEOM is going to build a totally new city at the Red Sea and solving the transportation problem there. So check it out. New city landscapes will be designed. And if we talk about real estate development, they are at the core of it. Mobility. Mobility is our focus. And as you have heard from Urška, yes, I do work a lot for mobility companies, and at the center, some big OEMs around here in Germany. And of course, we look into that, exactly into that. On the left-hand side, you see the highway coming from San Francisco city center, going out to Palo Alto. On the right-hand side, you see Delhi. In the middle, you see the longest ever occurring traffic jam that was in China. It lasted for 12 days. You see Lagos, and down at the bottom, we see what a car normally does. It sits around for 23 hours per day. It just sits on a parking space, doing nothing. That's what we're facing. Public transport looks different. In some places, we've got totally overcrowded public transport. And in some places, we don't have any. So traffic is the pain point. When you look at the largest city, 31 large cities, we were asked of what is the most important point they have to solve. It's not about leisure, it's not about culture, it's not about education, it's about traffic. And here comes a very, very interesting number. 42% of the commuters who use public transport are keen to search for alternatives. 42%. But 37% of people who are using their own car are looking for alternatives as well. So we've got totally frustrated commuters. And for that, there are some solutions coming up. And I know the focus of this hackathon is more focused on cars and mobility by cars. But of course, we have to look at the whole picture. And we've got trams setting up very easily and very quickly. We've got Autobahn, a solution from Germany. We've got duck train coming from RTW Aachen. We've got Lilium, air transport. And of course, we've got city bikes. These are all solutions we all have to put into our picture, into our ecosystem. So only thinking about mobility of cars would be jumping too short. But the car industry is reacting on that. So who are or which roles do we have in the mobility arena for the future? Well, we've got the grid master, and I think we've got the grid master today who's operating this hackathon. But we've got the mobility grid behind that. We've got the mobility service aggregators who are putting the bits and pieces of mobility services together. And we've got the ingredient companies, the ones who develop solutions for mobility. And last but not least, and that's a very sad story for the OEMs, we've got the metalsmiths who are building cars or mobilities. Before, we only had at the center the car builders, the metalsmith. So we are opening up now a whole ecosystem. So how's the car industry reacting on that? Well, they are following 5 major trends: sharing, sustainability, connectivity, autonomy, and electrification. Jump into that one for a short while. And now here comes the story, and we really should follow that story. Sustainability, a story to be told. If we look at the CO2 emissions we have at the moment, and we want to reach the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees, we have to come down from 335 gigatons of CO2 emissions today to 45. From 335 to 45. And how do we do that? We do that through zero emissions vehicles, a minus of 70%. We do that through transition technology, like hybrids, minus 86%. Core is travel less, minus 92%. Individual traveling, minus 92%. Please take that in as a note. That's the pathway we have to reach the climate agreement of Paris of minus 1.5. Increase renewables by 91%. And zero carbon supply chains by minus 90%. So this is the challenge the mobility sector is focusing on. If we want to reach the Paris Agreement of reaching most of plus 1.5 degrees, we have to follow that line. And of course, the hackathon here today is right in this line. So what is about in the sustainability sector doing? Well, all big ones committed their part in it, from Audi, Volvo, BMW, you name it. And here's an interesting one. And when we think about solutions, one is the EU. We cover that by regulations. So the whole pathway we saw before will be covered by laws and regulations. There's no escape on that one. And the reaction is, and that's very interesting, like for BMW, BMW is opening up a lab. And in this lab, they invite people to come along and to experience what does it mean to rethink, reuse, reduce, and recycle. So this could be an idea for LS maybe, to open up a constant laboratorium where you can invite people constantly to move in with their teams, have team event there besides doing a nice outing event. Let's think about circularity. And of course, the materials following. Electric material, which are sort of moving into sustainability, hemp, and others. And maybe even turning it CO2 negative. And this is something which you might think of when you think about electricity. Check out what kind of products are there around which are CO2 negative already. Connectivity, of course, it's all about being connected to everyone. It will open up a totally new hemisphere of providers, an ecosystem, all provided by connectivity. So when you think about your solutions of charging, don't only think of one player in the game, it's a whole ecosystem. And this ecosystem will be driven by connectivity. Maybe you've got a separate road because you did a certain kind of shopping before. Who knows? This will be reflected in cars. This will be reflected in the car OS. Maybe your solution should be connected to that as well. Think about it. It's connected to materials, which are certainly smart materials. It will reflect on cars, how we will use them, like the Urban Out from Mini as a living space. And it will reflect on the car, which opens up and suddenly it's your car. And next day it's someone else's car because the lightning impulse and the whole infrastructure will change to your needs. And of course, we will have forced updates, but we'll see that later. Doing a very crazy story here. Talking about connectivity. This is a wearable where your brain waves are connected to the machine. Or as you open up your car, your chip. Or, and this is Nissan doing, taking your brain waves and steering your car. Autonomy, it's right on the rise. And as you might have followed the legislations in Germany, they opened up now this year for level 4. So it's coming. And there are cars around, like the Aero, which is actually cleaning the air. It's an autonomous vehicle developed by a British company. But to break it down to solutions which are already on the road, you see little autonomous buses like in Sion, or like in Switzerland, down there from Ringspeed. Or the modern London taxis, that's the one on the left. Or the MIT. Look at this solution here, and this might be an interesting one to think of. They call it Persuasive Electric Autonomous Vehicle. Why persuasive? Because it's not endangering you. It's like a bicycle, and it's autonomous, and it's for the last mile transport. And it can drive on bicycle paths and footpaths, and it's interacting with people. It stops, it talks to you. And it could pick you up at your apartment. Talking about autonomy once again, at the moment we've got in Munich 821,000 cars registered. 821,000 cars registered in Munich. Together with IBM, we were calculating how many cars would we need. We would need between 20,000 and 100,000 robotaxis to provide the same logistic. Coming from 821,000 cars, going down to 20 to 100,000 robotaxis. Another one is shared mobility. And if you look at that one, that's a real interesting figure. If you talk about business cases, we see a rise in shared mobility every year of 19.2%. 19.2%. Only Didi delivers 60 million daily trips. One single company, 60 million. So transportation as a business service model, that's something you should think of. Some people take it differently. We work just a little bit different. Nissan, by the way. And of course, we've got different approaches here in Slovenia as well. Our dear friend Matej here with Avantcar. But of course, we've got companies like Turon who open up an Airbnb for cars. So it could be an Airbnb of chargers, Airbnb of electric vehicles, Airbnb of battery. I don't know. We've got companies like Quick Ride in India, good friends of ours. Largest and top-rated carpooling network where you actually share your drive, meet friends and colleagues. And besides that, and if you look at the upper line of the slide, it's beyond carpool now. It's about jobs. It's about selling stuff. It's actually about everything of your life. It's a community effort. So again, when you think of solutions, not only think of tech solutions, it's a community questions you have to solve, a social accepted solution. Another quick story on that one. We all know Uber coming from taxi and going over for free video conferencing. They understood what mobility job to be done is, getting people together. And last but not least, electrification. And electrification is running big high, and we saw the numbers. And I started this slide actually at the beginning of this year, and there were 4 on them. Now look at that, what happened now. These are all the companies who pledged now to move out of combustion engines, moving over to electric vehicles. And the last one announced it was Peugeot. Just 2 days ago, they will go all electric by 2030. So all of them are moving over to all electric vehicles, no combustion engines anymore. And down there you see even Rolls-Royce, and I'm happy to be part of the team to bring the first electric magic carpet of the Rolls-Royce down on the road. So all of them are moving. It changes the interior. And of course, it changes what kind of batteries do we need. And of course, the batteries we have at the moment might be not the solutions. So we've got here, for example, from Log9 material, graphene batteries. We really should look into that one as well. And of course, we've been talking about that today already. Vehicle to grid solutions, power storage solutions, your car as a power storage. Nissan is on that one. And of course, we have to solve the solution we've been talking about. And these are some of the pictures I gathered in the net. And there are some solutions already around, and we've heard already, yeah, Uber City was bought by Shell, using the lamppost for charging, or connected curb. And look at that number, 190,000 on-street devices will be implied by 2030 by street furniture. Or a tank truck, the charge ferry coming around, and you pay £5.9 for getting your car started. Comes around overnight. Or maybe concierge charging with Sepify. Someone picks up your car, drives it to the chargers, and promises you your car will be charged at least 1 day a week. Or having the green mole digging through the underground and coming out with a charging spot. Or having pop-up electric chargers. Or using electricity, which is already on the ground, of having cabinets providing electricity. If all that doesn't work, put it on a mobile trolley. But as we heard, we're looking for solutions which are not yet on the market. So that's your question. Some solutions go without the charging. On the right-hand side, you see Lamborghini. You hardly can find it under that. The Cybertruck, and of course, a Tesla. But you've got electrification with the sun already on the road, with the Lightyear 1 in the Netherlands, or the Sonos car coming from Munich. You're not lost. You're here. What do we need? It's up to you now. We need your moonshot ideas. We've got a huge problem. We need radical solutions. and use breakthrough technology. Looking forward to your solutions, men, women, teams, companies. It's on us to move the world. Thank you very much.